Hi guys, welcome to the semifinals of Novice 2015. In government we have SBA, and in education we have UN. Just a reminder before the debate starts or come in, please do it in between speeches. Phones on silent, keep your cheering and jeering to a minimum. With that being said, on the motion, this House will cut aid to Uganda until homosexuality is decriminalized. I invite the Prime Minister.
The act of decriminalizing a lifestyle that many individuals choose of being homosexual is not just wrong, but extremely disgusting. The discrimination that Ugandans face, especially homosexual Ugandans in the sphere of Uganda that's extremely conservative, is extremely high. We want to put a stop to that. The international community owes the people of Uganda protection. By fueling them with aid, you fuel the nation with hatred over these gays. We want to make this aid conditional. We want these individuals to be responsible. Our policy on one level. Why we'll cut all aids to Uganda until policies shifted to be gay friendly. That means you will be allowed to be gay society, and you will be a person that will not go to jail if you choose to be of a different lifestyle from the conservatives. Right? We'll make it conditional, and even if it already is, we'll back it up with this particular condition. But before that, what are the problems they want to solve in this debate? Three main problems. Number one, that the discrimination to the Ugandan gays has been going on for far too long, and no one has dared to step in to solve the problem within Uganda. Number two, the discrimination within Ugandans of the gays is extremely bad and extremely horrible until they pass the bill to tell everyone, hey, kill the gays with that bill that was passed in this year. Number three, that we want to make nations fueling these countries conditional and make them be responsible for what happens within Uganda, because you are the individual that is giving them money, you have a right to be the characterization that is coming from Thai government about the situation within Uganda or nations in Africa in general, right? Nations in Africa like Uganda depend especially on aid. Analysis claim that dependency negates African economy to reform. For example, when Britain cut 19 million to Malawi in 2011 for arresting 2 gay men for being homosexual or holding hands within public, they immediately reformed, changed their policies, and became more gay-friendly. We want to extend that same principle from the example that happened 3 years ago to happen again within situations like this, especially when the situation is so dire, until they pass the bill called Kill the Gay Bill, right? We think that's extremely dangerous. But the third characterization is that nations like the United States, United Kingdom, or France, or China, or any other nations have huge autonomy over the Ugandan. It makes up about 92% of the growing economy that exists within Uganda. That proves the autonomy that people necessarily have. But before I move on to my 2 arguments, sure.
Your point on how this policy will destroy change is false, because like you see, there's another example on how Netherlands is still imposed the same condition, and yet no change has been made.
Netherlands is imposed the same condition. Of nonsense. Netherlands is so friendly, right? They want they allow abortion, they allow prostitution. We think that's extremely simple to understand, right? They are not against gays. They are really good people, right? Here's a situation that exists within Uganda. You guys just can't just make up an example just like that. Firstly, why it's your money, your discretion, therefore conditional aid should be used. First level of analysis. What are the autonomy that these governments have towards the economy of Uganda? Aids necessarily within towards its nations help with the military, for example. When cities like Uganda depend on the nations of France for 78% of military funds. That means France helps them with getting guns, getting helps with the security of the nation as a whole when you fuel police and so on and so forth. The situation analysis, will it be effective? Because if you have the dependency or you have the autonomy that you have over these nations, you must use this autonomy to your own benefit and to the Ugandans' benefit as a whole, because we think that these people have been suffering for far too long. That means it will be effective, because if you don't want to listen to us, we will cut off all aid and you will suffer economically. So we think that this policy is perfectly fine. They will change everything that's beneficial. Right, done with the feasibility stuff. Moving on to the benefits that we have in today's debate. Right, under this argument about how conditional aid should be assessed. 3 benefits. Number 1, we think that the gays will be protected with situations like this, because the discrimination is so bad that if you see a man holding another man, you will throw tomatoes or whatever you have in your hand at him because of his lifestyle that he's chosen. We think it's unfair to these people. We think these people deserve a right to say something, but every time they try to say something, it's just shut down just like anything else. We think that these rights should be provided to these individuals. We think it's fair that we do this. But why won't it look like Western imperialists? Because that's what they're going to say. You know, the West is going to imperialize being a situation like this. Firstly, we don't think that the West only aids this country. We think other nations also aid this country from the East or from, you know, Asia in general. But secondly, we think that examples like in Mali or Malawi, where we've already made conditional aid, have already changed them. And they don't think they're Western imperialists. They become Western friendly or nation friendly to other nations in situations like this. Then and therefore, they change their policies to accommodate to what is right and what is liberal. We think that gay discrimination is very dangerous. We think it must stop at the end of the day. Second benefit that you have is that it's your money. That means it's your taxpayers. They are paying for the amount of aid that you put to the other nations. Then and therefore, that means you have the ability and you have the right to use that money for your own benefit. Your policies are that gays are good people. Gays are liberal. We should be liberal. We should accept everyone for who they are. If your money is being fueled into a country that's hating gays, you're only fueling the hatred that's contradicting your own policies in status quo. We think that's extremely dangerous, because you as a person, as say telling your own Americans or your own British people they're being gay, you know, hey, you can be gay if you want to be gay. We think it's fine. But at the end of the day, you're fueling Ugandans to skill. We think it's unfair for these people to do that. No, thank you. But the third benefit that you have is that nations like this have a moral obligation to develop peace within nations like this. Because when it comes to peace, you need to understand. Peace comes with understanding. You can never change or engage with these people because these people are extremely conservative. The only way that you have to do that is to impose values, impose these kinds of values on them so that they will change. When Malawi was extremely stubborn or Mali was extremely stubborn, they changed because of an imposition that exists. We think it's extremely important to understand. Moving on to my second argument, that aid has to be a benefit for all. Because what does a Ugandan government do? When they criminalize a lot of individuals, just like any other criminal within status quo, you don't get the benefits that any average citizen gets. You suffer and rot in jail because of something that you decided to do as a person, which is not wrong at the end of the day. Why is this bad? Because these are individuals that are people as well. These are people that contribute to your economy. These are tax-paying citizens who do their best to contribute to the economy of Uganda. Let it be like 8%, but it still does something towards the economy of Uganda. At the end of the day, these are people who are contributing citizens. You put them in jail because of their own lifestyle choice. We think that's beneficial. We think that's dangerous. We want to make it a benefit by changing our policies. What will our policy do, and what the people within Uganda? Two benefits. Number one, they will make policies that benefit all. Even if they want to be as biased as they possibly can, you have no choice but to be as unbiased as you possibly can. Your policies will have to affect all non-criminals. When you remove the idea of being a criminal within situations like this, they automatically reap the benefits of any average citizen. We think that's extremely important to understand, extremely important to give to these people in status quo. But secondly, we think that at the end of the day, your money and your own money that is intentional to help these individuals. You say that you want to help these people and so on and so forth, but not really doing anything. You put a message and send out a message that the people are not willing to stand by if you go and just impose values and discriminate gays just like this. We will do something and we will make sure that you don't do this thing anymore. It's extremely myopic and extremely horrible for individuals to suffer because of the choice of lifestyle. We think it's important to understand because you have an autonomy, you have a responsibility, and you have the right and the choice to do so, to change the situation in Uganda for the better. We're very proud to propose.
Yeah.
I thank the Prime Minister and I invite the Leader of Opposition.
Here, here, here.
Mr. Speaker, they talk a lot about how criminalizing homosexuality is bad. The entire case is that we do not contend that it's not bad. We believe that the burden of government to prove today is to how can cutting the aid is going to change the law, we criminalize the people. Our burden of opposition today is how cutting this aid is not going to do better in changing the law, in having government to change the law. So they have to acknowledge that. Responses which clash directly to the case, and I will have two substantives to bring to you. So my first substantive is the exploitation of the disadvantage of Uganda, the conditional aid to them. Secondly, it's on the nature of society of Uganda, how it's the nature of the society itself become the resistant to the change in law. So the responses here. My first response is that they say that they're dependent on the law itself. And because they say it's dependent on the law, then they force Malawi to reform and change the policy. It's because Uganda, it depends on aid from, for example, France for military reasons. We need this side of the house to tell us how is the aid so dire or so impossible to survive without this aid. I think the examples that they give, like military, it's not a very good example. And secondly, the responses, it's on the right to impositions of value. They use the examples of American and Malawi. I think this is a very good example. Just to understand that the money that they pay to Malawi to stop the aid, or they want to give the aid from America to Malawi, comes from a taxpayer. We have to understand that taxpayers come from all range of United States. We'll agree one thing: homosexuality is not a global right now yet, because there are always Christians, for example, in America. It's very conservative. They're opposed to homosexuality itself. So I don't think that the condition or the advantage is saying that because you pay the money, you have the right to say, because the saying that they are saying is not a say of all Americans itself, which all Americans are taxpayers in this condition. Thirdly, they say that it's very unfair because you don't have this aid to cater to all. They say that benefits are not to all. Two situations. First, if you are a gay and you are known as a gay, you end up in jail. You are not paying taxes. So we don't think that the benefit that are saying because you're a taxpayer, citizen of the country, and you do not receive benefits. Secondly, if you're not known as a gay because you're afraid to be criminalized, you will receive the benefits. So we don't think that the undistributed benefits exist at all in the case. Yes.
So should we also stop paying for welfare smokers, because not everyone is a smoker, paralleling to your case stats?
We don't think that we need to debate on the principle of smoking, because what we're talking here is humanitarian aid, which is going to, if you take it out, you are going to cause harm to people. They're causing death, more than death. So we think that they're standing on a very moral high ground, Mr. Speaker. But it's inconsistent in principle, because in the same time they want to help, they are using the disadvantage to forcibly leave in law. I do not think that the government will impose this moral high grounds towards Russia, because they know that Russia do not need the money. They're using this over the rights of the citizens of Uganda in this case, Mr. Speaker. We talk about my first substantive, aids and impositions of political benefits. Like what I said just now, we have to understand how does the aid come in. The aids come in from a lot of people with the intention of helping others. It's not about intention of imposing your political beliefs. You want to help, that's why you give the money to the government to help. And what are the purpose of helping in this case? What are the purpose of the aid? For example, they contended that Uganda is so poor. They have a very low GDP.
So what they need from this aid are food, a medical access. If you do not have this, if you don't have food, Uganda people are going to gay, or if you don't have medical aids, no matter you are gay or not a gay, you're going to suffer from this. We have to understand that to impose your principles to a return, it's not the moral high ground that they want. It's a humanitarian aid that we're saying to give to Uganda. It's money. If you cut off the aid, what is consequences is that people who need the aid, no matter that you are gay or not, you are going to suffer. This is my first point. Yes?
If cutting aid has a direct harm on a nation, is this enough of an incentive to better suit your law to, not kill the gays?
Yeah.
We believe that issue should be a governmental issue. I will go directly to my next point. The nature of society of Uganda. How is it the society itself forms the resistance to change in law? Firstly, we have to understand why the reasons that there is a law criminalizing homosexual in Uganda. Because Uganda is a society with a lot of Christians, and most of the Christians, what they are holding, are unfriendly relationships with homosexuals. This is a very important law to protect the gays in some way. I'm not saying that we are defending the law, but in some way it's going to create a lot of hate crimes in Uganda. And this is what the government relies. Because we have to understand that law is the reflection of society. Uganda is a democratic society, Mr. Speaker. They elect the government. The PM that passed this law voted in a lot of times. Although this law is already exists from the beginning until now. But people still want him because most of the people, general people, believe in what the government is believing in. There's a self-defamation of people to determine what law they want. It's not the other countries, for example, United States, dictate what law should be. We don't believe that to use this advantage is going to be as morally as they claim to be so. And so, my conclusion is, will this proposal change principles that the Uganda government takes? Will it change the law? We say no. Society is going to be suffered by this aid. They will hate these gays more, for example. They will hate the United States more, for example. No change. Government they will always want to win the votes of the people. They will not change unless the people want to change. Therefore, we strongly oppose.
They accepted our characterization as to how African countries are usually dependent on it, and how African countries are willing to change their legislation in preparation to help and serve their people. That's why we think it's essential that side opposition didn't contradict themselves by telling us that people will be starving on the street and people won't be getting food. This is assuming that Uganda will not accept our terms and Uganda will not accept our demands. Yeah. This is based on our characterization. This stood throughout the LO speech. I feel levels to rebuttal, we shall proceed to making one argument, which is how it's important for Uganda to reform as a society before they become independent of aid at the end of the day, because no one will depend on it forever. But the few levels of rebuttals, because they try to parallel this to Netherlands, because it seems Netherlands has been making this claim for a long time. At the end of the day, Uganda hasn't gone anywhere. The problem with this is problem with regulation. This means that not enough countries are provoking the same claim. Thus, if Netherlands cuts aid to Uganda, you still have US and UK still giving the same form of aid at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker. We think they're fine losing one party that's helping them. The problem with that is, if you can have societies that group together to give the same message towards Uganda that we want you to legalize homosexuality, this is when they'll really change. But then they try to give us three responses towards my PM's argument. Because they try to tell us that people necessarily, they try to tell us that exploitation within circumstances is not justified. Because taxpayers are paying money and the money is going to go to another country to help that other country. This is what we tell you, the state always makes decisions that help people that aren't necessarily you. That's why you build schools for the less fortunate at the end of the day, even if you're not one of them. That's why you always pay welfare for individuals who can't necessarily pay them. We subsidize circumstances as to what the government thinks is naturally good within circumstances. We think that taxpayers' money shouldn't be an issue. But then they try to tell us that these things can't cater to all. Because at the end of the day, if a gay person went to jail, he didn't pay tax. The problem with this was that he wanted to pay tax. He didn't get a chance to pay tax, Mr. Speaker. At the end of the day, if you give him that option, he can derive the benefits from it. But then they went on to give us two arguments. Firstly, is exploitation justified? And secondly, the nature of society. Under the first argument, they told us that if exploitation is not justified because the purpose of country. That's why we tell you it's conditional aid. That means we're attaching a demand towards the aid, thus meaning the real purpose of the aid at the end of the day is still perverse. The secrecy of the aid and the circumstances of how we help this country is naturally the same. That means these countries will naturally accept the aid because they are already dependent as much as 92% as to how foreign countries already fund their aid. What does this mean? It's not exploitation. Either people that you naturally assume we exploit are people who are already victimized in nature. People who are not given their rights as a whole. We think this is not exploitation. This is standing up for people's rights because these individuals are naturally individuals who are already criminalized. But on the second level, which they try to tell us, that people will not suffer. People won't get food at the end of the day, and this is harmful. This is assuming that a country like Uganda does not prioritize its economy, which is actually nonsense. Because at the end of the day, every country wants what's in its best interest to actually serve another term of governments, and governments will do what's even in its best, even if it's biased, because at the end of the day, they want to maintain that country. But then the second argument, because they try to tell us the nature of society and how killing the gays is a governmental issue, not a societal issue. Yes, but the effects that you have on society is making it a societal issue. How you treat gays within our society is already creating that to such a large PM society. That is harmful because the ideologies that have already been spread are ideologies that are flawed in nature, thus meaning we need to give conditional aid even if all the people within that circumstance or the majority of individuals think they're bad. We think liberalization and modernization is naturally good. But then the last argument they'll make, because they try to tell us that implementing foreign policies is bad. This one will give you examples of how France governs Mali even in circumstances where they think this is how they maintain a proper circumstance and a sustainable country. This is important to recognize because after these places where that there should be another governing side that's already responsible and already sustainable and a developed country to lead you. Before I move on to my first argument, yes.
In a highly conservative Christian society in Uganda, tell me why your proposal would work.
In a highly conservative Christian country like in a highly conservative Christian country like Uganda, at the end of the day, it still can change in ideologies. Like how America doesn't abandon Christianity as a whole. It is how we choose to liberalize in these kinds of circumstances, how we choose to treat gays within our current society. We're not accepting them as a whole, we're just not denying them the full capacity of rights. The state has to be neutral, and so does the people. We can't discriminate these individuals, we can't impose our ideologies on them and make them feel discriminated at the end of the day. This is paralleling this to circumstances where other countries are also conservative, partially at the end of the day, but the discrimination isn't that much because Uganda spreads its ideologies extremely. My first argument on the importance of reformation, because at the end of the day, Uganda cannot always squander money that's being given by other countries, because a lot of countries are giving money towards Uganda at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, and this is why partially that Netherlands being ignored even when it's making its claims towards trying to stop homosexuality. What is the problem with it? Progress, or the economy of the country won't actually progress even more if all individuals are compliant to your policies or all individuals are given the chance to be productive within society. Why is this important to recognize? Because if you're going to imprison all gays and not allow them to be productive within society, if you're going to seclude gays from other and segregate them from other parts of society, this brings two major harms. You give them no opportunity to prove their worth within society, and this harms the progression of corporations and people within circumstances of Uganda. This doesn't happen in other countries, when every individual within society is trying their best to contribute back to society. Under Uganda's paradigm, right, people are not being given the chance to contribute back within society. This is in the best interest of Uganda as a developing nation as a whole. But the second level of analysis to this, which is also crucial, because it's the duty of aid givers or countries that facilitate peace within international bodies, countries that are already developed, we speak of first world countries, to provide these conditions towards Uganda. Why? Because it principally quantifies aid. We want to give aid towards people, or we want to give aid towards a country that can spread it to everyone, not just individuals who you think don't deserve it. Just because that person chose to be gay within a society, you don't give. Realize how much aid we can give towards society and how the money that countries like Uganda is being used to the fullest extent. Now Uganda is forced to make social benefit everyone. They can't just use their money into promoting things like kill the gays or promoting and giving out pamphlets to everyone saying this is naturally what we want to do. This is how they're being socially irresponsible. But thirdly, and this is the most important, Uganda will be independent of aid. They won't be dependent of aid for much long, because at the end of the day, there are countries that's developing circumstantially, right? Even if you want to ignore the fact that not everyone's productive. When Uganda becomes a country that's independent of all the aid that people give them, you have no leverage on them and you have no liability on them. That means you have no opportunity or no chance to change the ideologies that are flawed within Uganda. If side opposition wants to agree that Uganda and homosexuality being criminalized is flawed, at the end of the day, we need to do it now. Because once they become independent of all the aid that they're being given, they won't need to listen to anyone. They won't need to listen to the countries that are giving them aid. We're very proud to propose.
All right, I thank the Deputy Prime Minister, and I invite the Deputy Leader of
On the motion whether or not we should cut aid towards Uganda until they change their anti-gay laws, Mr. Speaker, we on the opposition side wholeheartedly oppose this motion, as we believe that, firstly, there why change. Secondly, we believe that there is no guarantee that these laws will be changed at the end of the day. So firstly, this I'm going to do for the government side first, and I'm going to deliver our argument, which is on the harms of their proposal, Mr. Speaker. So firstly, the rebuttals of the government side. Firstly, the government gave an idea on how we need to justify the use of taxpayers' money, on how Americans are suddenly unhappy because their money is channeled into a country where their laws are opposing this Americans' taxpayers' principle. Firstly, this is an assumption that all Americans believe in gay place. We don't think that all taxpayers necessarily support this particular principle, to the fact that government, the sourcing of their money should be funded into what they believe in. Now, Mr. Speaker, we believe that in America, Mr. Speaker, most of the states don't recognize gays in the first place. So why should their money be channeled? Why should their money be cut off, in a sense, because their principles are suddenly not believed in, denied? So secondly, the second argument is on how we are not giving gays the opportunity to prove their worth. Firstly, we question, like, why is your sexuality? Why is your sexuality a necessary proponent into proving how you're contributing towards society? We don't think you're defined by whether or not you're speaker in terms of being employed in the state in Uganda. The only problem in Uganda when you're gay, when you're actually showing public display of PDA with another guy or with another girl, that is when the problem comes. And the only harms that comes to you is that you are put to jail, Mr. Speaker. Before that, yes.
So the problem that is that people can still be productive as long as they're not gay. Doesn't that also concede they're already victimized in society, and them not being allowed to be gay is already harming their productivity? Right? Yeah.
How on earth are me not allowed to show that I like another girl obstructing my productivity in the world? Because my sexuality has nothing to do with what I do in the daily process, in the daily life. Denied. So moving on, Mr. Speaker, on how the third argument is how this change has to be done now towards Uganda before Uganda is independent towards aid. Mr. Speaker, we don't think that the change is necessary in the first place. And secondly, Mr. Speaker, if the government were truly firm on their stance how discrimination towards gays should be abolished, why are they targeting Uganda? Why not target bigger countries like Russia, which also discriminates towards But we believe that they are picking on the smaller people who need this financial aid in the first place. So done with that, I'm going to move on to the points on the opposition side, right? I'm going to talk to you on the harms of the proposal on two levels. Firstly, in terms of security, and secondly, on how it infringes the sovereignty of Uganda. Firstly, let's analyze first. Why is homosexuality even illegal in Uganda in the first place? We think that state imposes this law for several reasons. One of the reasons is for the protection of the homosexuals themselves. Why? Because we believe that the society of Uganda are probably cannot accept gays in the first place. PM also conceded to the fact that gays in Uganda are being thrown food at, Ms. Speaker. And at the harsher level, they are being abused, they are being hurt, they are being they are being beaten up. So at this point, we believe that the state has a justified reason to make it illegal so that they don't show themselves publicly, Ms. Speaker, for their own protection. It happens made it illegal for women to wear hijab. In France cannot accept Muslim community because they are still in the idea of Muslims are terrorists. So this is a form of protection towards the women in France. At the same way, how Uganda is proposing this, Uganda actually wants this form of protections towards their gays themselves. Denied. The second reason why Uganda makes this illegal, right, is because HIV is a big problem in Uganda, and one of the sourcing of the AIDS that come towards Uganda is in the form of medication for these HIV cases, and 60% of HIV are caused by homosexuality, Ms. Speaker. So why is it then when you cut financial aid, Mr. Speaker, so we question, what is the justification of cutting aid towards Uganda when the problem of why they need aid in the first place is caused by homosexuality itself? Before that, yes.
You're telling me a government that puts gays in jail and then also tortures them and gives out a bill saying kill the gays is doing it in the best interest of protecting gays from being killed by society.
Sir, the state of Uganda itself is not opposed towards gays, Ms. Speaker. The ones who are opposing the gays are the civilians, are the society themselves, not the state. State prepares this law denied for the protection of the civilians themselves. So moving on to the second level on how this infringes the sovereignty of Uganda. Firstly, when the government is elected, we believe that the government has the responsibility and all the rights to manufacture the laws and in according to the principles of that particular state. So if Uganda is already opposed towards homosexuality, why then do other countries have a right to want to infringe on this sovereignty, infringe their principles, push forward their principles? Okay, which you desperately need, by the way, you have to change your principles in accordance to us. We think that Uganda has the right to maintain their stand towards homosexuality, towards gays. And at the end of the day, Ms. Speaker, why do we think that infringing on the rights, infringing on sovereignty of a particular country is wrong? Is we believe that when principles and stances of mankind is constantly changing. Whenever something happens and another country don't believe in what Uganda is doing, how then are you sure that they won't try to try to force Uganda to change their principles in accordance to what they believe just for you to get help? This is the case. This is why we question, why are you targeting countries that desperately need the aid in the first place? If your true stance is supporting homosexuality, then it should be for all states in the world as a whole. So what I've done for you today is I've rebutted the points given by the government side, and I've delivered an argument which is on the harms of the proposal on two levels. The security of Uganda. We believe that the are important and hate crimes should not be raised because of their proposal. Thank you.
Alright, I thank the Deputy Leader of Opposition. I now invite the Dr. Wit.
Extremism warrants recognition. Negligence demands punishment. Aid has to be conditional on how the countries act and whether their actions warrant that aid. When Uganda fails to recognize the harms of not need not be punished, but extending that punishment to death. We need to stop sending aid. There are three issues in today's debate that I will clarify to you. Firstly, on whether this is an imposition of ideas and if that's a benefit or not. Secondly, on the nature of society. And lastly, on the progress of Uganda. So, ideas. They told us that the sole purpose of aid is to help the people. If it doesn't help the people, then we're not being extending aid, we're being selfish. Secondly, they told us that this is the consequences will mean the people die, therefore being immoral. And lastly, they talked about the taxpayers, how we're not being proportional to everyone in the nation. There are two levels to this issue. Three levels to this issue. Firstly, there are two kinds of aids, as my second speaker told you. There's conditional and non-conditional aid. We stated in our policy that by providing conditional aid, we're not being immoral by giving you a criteria to fill. That's the terms of conditional aid. This is how it's acted, this is how it's given to you. Because that's something already moral. But the question we need to ask, why is this form of conditional aid more moral than what you're providing? For three reasons. Firstly, because we make you act just and fair. This means that even if you are reluctant to accept gays, we're doing it for you. So if you are a government that supports gays, you are a government that is extremely fair, but your society is against you, that's why we give you the incentive, we do the change for you. We are being fair, being moral towards the gays who can't watch that on their own, we're being fair towards the government who seems to be too scared to do it on their own terms. The second thing, or second reason why it's better, when we provide aid that isn't only to help, it has direct link to development of a nation morally. Meaning that even if this aid does have some implications as to how the people will live on their life, it's also to impose good values on you. So we are imposing values, but are these values good or not? We're extending you modern ideas that gays should be accepted. We're making a more open-minded society. So even if they are imposition of ideas, it's a good imposition that the people should follow. No, thank you. Sit down. We now have good values being used, and we can actually change the perception of gays as a whole. When we do this, we have a developmental benefit that could be in long-term sustainability. But a third and final reason, and we are acting on an international good, not simply one that's between nations. Meaning that we're not doing something that's only good for your nation. It's an international standard of good that homosexuals should be recognized. Homosexuals don't need to be killed by virtue of being a homosexual. By doing this, we're doing a good that is not only exclusive to us, it's already inclusive of everyone else. We're acting as a just nation, as a just arbitrator of aid. The second level to this issue, they told us that not everyone is gay because it would be unfair if one nation has to provide aid for their benefits. By virtue of being a minority, side opposition simply dismissed all the harms that could be apparent to gays, and they said it's all right if they're being killed, it's all right if they're being criminalized. They're a minority. We should dismiss them. The deciding factor on aid isn't if the majority of taxpayers are gay, it's whether if we support them. The USA and international parties already support gays. Because of that, it's a good value that we give them and we're lending them support in this case. We're not being unfair, we're not being unproportional towards the rest of your nation's taxpayers. We're doing something that is set standard of fair. Before I move on to my second issue.
Parliament of Uganda belongs to Uganda people or United States, LGBT friendly people.
Of course, as you can see that they would pass a law that kills gays sexuals. But the reason here is that that's why we're making the change for you. We're being the change. If you don't accept our aid, your people are going to be harmed. Your choice here matters very little, but the benefits here are very apparent. We say that it's a change that will happen regardless of whether you want it or not. The second issue on the nature of society. Well, I'll explain a bit more elaborately on this. They told us that society won't change even if we pass a law, because that there's no direct benefit and it's kind of redundant. There's twofold response to this. Firstly, and that's why we need to provide an active incentive to make it more likely for society to change by giving them a law. Because when you pass a law that makes gays accepted and makes it illegal for you to kill a gay, that's why your incentives to change, your incentives to abide by law is a lot more. People will change and they will act by that. And even still, a subsequent action occurs, that meaning you will actually understand this over time. So it's a long-term benefit. But the second part to this response, or even if society isn't okay with homosexuals, they don't accept your law, it doesn't give you the right to kill them. Because there may be a large portion of society that says gays are bad, gays will never be all right. But while the rights of the homosexual being recognized in this case, you're not recognizing their right to life, you're not recognizing their right to choice. You're still being unfair towards them. In your side, you're being unfair towards one party. You want to be inclusive of all. No, thank you, ma'am, a bit later. But the second response to this, when I say that gays are okay as long as it's done in secret. Well, gays aren't all right as long as they're criminal. They're persecuted as criminal regardless if they're public or not. paradigm, however, is not only do they persecute you, they're given the right to kill you if you're a homosexual. Kill the gays bill kills homosexuals in immoral, inhumane ways that are extremely disgusting. What your stance on this is, it's okay if they die. They just can't be public about it. If they stay in secret, they won't die. This is a simple response that doesn't deal with the immediate problem. If this person dies, regardless of if he went public or not, what is your stance? Will you change then? We didn't see a response. WIP can't change that. No, thank you, a bit later. But finally, on the last issue, on the progress of Uganda, and this was one that was quite funny, because he told us that because Russia doesn't act on it, because other nations might not accept gays, why don't we change it there? Why go to Uganda? Secondly, he told us that gays are being persecuted because we can prevent AIDS. And lastly, he told us how we infringe on the rights. 3 levels to this. Firstly, this isn't a nirvana policy, meaning that we want to help Uganda, we don't want to change the world as a better place. If we can help Uganda, we can minimize the harms against that, then that's our burden today's debate that we need to prove to you. You can't make us choose burdens and put burdens upon ourselves to your convenience. That's not a debate, that's you being one-sided. But the second level to this is that you can prevent AIDS. I'm sure that preventing AIDS is as rampant or effective as blatantly killing a homosexual. How is this in any way proportional to the harms that you have on AIDS to killing them? Because we feel that even if you're doing so, it's non-logical because the link doesn't exist, but you're being unfair towards gays who might not even want to have sex and spread AIDS in the first place. But the final level to this, on how we're infringing the rights by pushing forward our own principles. Firstly, we already told you this is conditional, so if you don't accept it, then fine, you can suffer as a nation. That's your choice. We're still giving you your own rights as a nation. Deal with it. We can't make you change everything as long as it's not international good. We're not doing something that's good for ourselves alone. We're not doing something good because we are selfishly being good. It's an international value of good, and we're acting by an international basis. This means we're not being selfish, we're not being one-sided, we're inclusive of everything else that matters. The conclusion to these issues that I've proposed to you today, that if they wanted to benefit, they need to give us reasons that make sense. Your whip can do very little to save you now, and even if it does, it's slightly unfair towards us. Thank you.
I think the government would right off this.
It's funny how their whip kept preempting me before I even opened my mouth, right? That's how afraid he is of me. I have 3 issues in today's debate. Issue 1, criminalizing versus not criminalizing. Issue 2, aid versus no aid. And issue 3, is it really worth it, the change that will come from it? But before I go on to my issues, let me first tackle what he brought to this debate, right? He came up saying that you don't have to make a choice. We can make a choice for you. Now let me ask you, when I change the law in my country, as usually if I change the law in my country, when the hate crimes go up, when people start killing gays, are you going to come inside here and solve the problem? Are you going to come here and control the situation there? Again, this is the Ugandan parliament and not US, right? We might as well not call it Uganda anymore. Secondly, should gays be accepted? Mr. Speaker, against gays. We are all for LGBT rights. But we are telling you that it's impossible in the Ugandan society, as everyone has mentioned, and I will further elaborate in my issues, right? Another huge clarification. The Ugandan law does not tell you to kill gays, right? It just criminalizes them. It's not killing gays, right? Secondly, even if it was to kill gays, right? And they say that now, since you criminalize it, people won't do it because they're scared to go to jail. Explain 2 things to me. Both do it rapidly. Everybody is not afraid to go to jail. Why? Because emotions are thumped a lot. No. And the biggest thing that we have to ask is, are we really helping Uganda, or are we making it worse? Which I will further elaborate in my issues, right? No. Issue number 1, criminalizing and not criminalizing. The 3 problems that they came up with today, that PM brought, is discrimination, discrimination, and discrimination against gays. Will your proposal really solve it? No. It's a problem-solution mismatch, Mr. Speaker. Why? They want to change the government, but they can't do anything to change the society. The society is how it is, right? It's a huge assumption that Mr. Murray did that bill, right? He came out saying He's just saying that, like he's not 100% okay with it. He's not against gays altogether. He's saying it is not the time, it's not the space for them to come out here, Mr. Speaker. Why? Because how society is, right? So does it really harm the gays, Mr. Speaker? The criminal in Uganda is highly Christian, Mr. Speaker, and these people really do not like gays, Mr. Speaker. So what happens when you remove the law? The gays will be happy. The gays will come out telling people that they are gay. What happens when they come out? Hate crimes increases, Mr. Speaker. So, and what happens when you do not criminalize it, Mr. Speaker? When hate crimes increases, etc. Under our proposal, you get to save gays from them not coming out. Under their proposal, you get more dead gays, right? So the question that you have to understand over here is, Mr. Speaker, is it really, is it okay for them to come out Uganda with the society over there and all that? I'm not oppressing them completely, but it's something they have to do because of the society over there, right, Mr. Speaker? And justify for the government to do this. In the 9/11 site, Mr. Speaker, they do not let you build mosque around it. Why? Is it oppression towards Muslims? No. They want to protect the Muslims. Why? Because at that particular zone especially, it's called Zone 0 or something, right? The people over there really hate Muslims. Why? Because of the attack, the Al-Qaeda to build a society and you make it worse, right, Mr. Speaker? At the end of the day, you can change laws, but principles can't change. Not now, especially. Second issue, on 8 versus no 8, not now. Okay? Where now you're forcing people to change to receive aid, Mr. Speaker. Is that really fair, Mr. Speaker? You're putting the countries at an unjust choice, where you choose your people or the gays, right? And we really asked you, if you're completely for homosexuals, right, and you want the whole world to accept homosexuals, please try it on Russia first. Russia has the same policy that Uganda has. They criminalize gays as a whole, right? So why don't you do it in Russia? Why Uganda? And the second, what happens if you don't have aid, Mr. Speaker? The people will suffer. You need to understand something. The main reason why aid goes to Russia is to help is medical purposes in HIV and AIDS, Mr. Speaker. Uganda, African nation, and young are homosexuals. So what happens when you take away aid now, Mr. Speaker? Since they portray government as hating gays so much, whatever little money that they have will not be channeled for these homosexual HIV patients. They'll be channeled to the rest. So under their paradigm, they're further oppressing and making it worse for homosexuals in Uganda, Mr. Speaker. Something that you should point out. And no, not now. And the most important thing, Mr. Speaker, why do people even give aid, Mr. Speaker? Is it really to put on their principles onto you? No. It's a humanitarian thing, right? Yeah, okay. You don't have to impose your principles on them, right, Mr. Speaker? You give aid, you don't expect things. Before I go on to method issues, yes.
Are you less likely to rape or kill a person when you know that you can be prosecuted and your hate crimes are
Please sit down, Mr. Speaker. When it comes to such as murder and rape, people do not go with the intention of doing it as per se. It is emotionally taken by them. If I really hate gay people and I see someone who's openly gay, a guy walking there with miniskirt and all, if I really hate them, I would kill them and then think, oops, I'm going to jail. The same thing happens to rape and murder, right? Now, is this change really justice, Mr. Speaker? First, the massive assumption that they made is a change will occur, Mr. Speaker. Let me just say, even if the change occurs, you must understand that it's a forceful change. Even in USA, Mr. Speaker, not all the states are for gay rights, right? There are states that don't do it. So under their proposal now, New York shouldn't have any relation with the countries the states that don't legalize it because they are against principles, right? That is a huge assumption under their paradigm. We are telling you why forceful change will not occur, right? The change has to come from society, Mr. Speaker. Something that we've been harping on since the very beginning. It's not the law, Mr. Speaker. Just because we change the law, it doesn't mean that the Ugandans are going to start making gay parades and all, and celebrating gays as a whole, Mr. Speaker. The gay issue is still going to be a taboo over there, right? So what is the burdens that came out in today's debate? The main burden that government side had is they had to prove to you why change will come and why is it worth making the people suffer by cutting aid, because they have not really proven that this change will come. And even if the law has changed, people will not accept gays, which is what we have already pointed out. What was our burden, Mr. Speaker? From the very start, we already told you that change will not come with change as well, Mr. Speaker. But their proposal will not make the change to solve this problem. How is a problem? Solution mismatch, right, Mr. Speaker? We are all for gay rights as well. And if there's a better way where it does not harm the rest of them as well, and maybe in another 50 and 100 years, maybe so, but not now, Not in Uganda and definitely not now. Before I end my speech, Mr. Speaker, let me change laws. Societal principles will not change, especially not with laws.
Alright, I claim the opposition whip. I now invite the reply.
Oh yeah. Hi, this is how I'll structure my reply speech. Firstly, I'm going to tell you what is the burden on both sides of the party and who at the end of the day proved their burden better. Now, firstly, what is the burden on the government side? The government side here had to prove to us what are the benefits of their proposal and how is this change justified, right? So the first benefit that the government talked about was how you're going to solve gay discrimination. Now we question you, who are the ones actually discriminating the gays in the first place? Is it the state or is it the civilians, Mr. Speaker? Now, contrary to what the government believes, the state does not kill gays in Uganda. The one who kills gays in Uganda are civilians who kill them out of hate crime, Mr. Speaker. So this problem shows to you that the acceptance of gays does not exist within the Ugandan society. Hence the problem, why should other countries enforce their principles on on supporting homosexuality on a country where the civilians themselves are not prepared to accept gays, Mr. Speaker. Vinod has told you on how Yoweri, the Prime Minister, am I pronouncing it right? The Prime Minister of Uganda has officially given out the statement how he himself believed that that Uganda is not prepared to accept homosexuality. Hence the reason for of this set of society. And we've told you, Ms. Speaker, on why this form of criminalization is a form of protection towards these people themselves. The second benefit that they talked to you was on how you're going to have a better use of taxpayers' money. And we told you how that's not does not necessarily go to whatever principles they believe in. I don't think really supporting the idea of homosexuality in the first place. Ms. Speaker, they believe that gay discrimination should not occur, and we tell you that the idea of rights towards being a homosexual has not been universally accepted in the first place. Now, for you to infringe on the sovereignty of a country or to deny them help, Ms. Speaker, you have to prove to us how the state that you are harming first has to be a state that has done gross injustice towards its civilians, Mr. Speaker. Just denying whether or not I can hold the hand of a girl, or if I can kiss Alison in public, does not show it's a grave injustice towards its civilian. This is contrary to what the government believes. This is not a form of discrimination towards the minorities. The minorities themselves, these gays, are happy to be protected under our law, because before this law was created, people were already against gays, and gays were publicly beaten up and publicly abused, Mr. Speaker. So moving on to the second, what is the burden on the opposition side? Our burden to you was to prove to you how this policy will bring more harm than whatever benefits that the government proposed. The nature of aid itself is to help the society of Uganda. How Uganda desperately needs this aid in terms of medication, in terms of food, in terms of resources, Ms. Speaker, and how denying this, how giving this temporary form of denial of aid, Speaker, is going to harm Uganda whether or not they decide to change their policy. Within that period of changing their policy, we think that civilians are the ones who are harmed in by their proposal. And we told you on how the further harms of this debate is that hate crimes will rise against nature of this particular state is one that does not approve of homosexuality in the first place. And we've told you on the harms of how you should not infringe the sovereignty of a country just because their principles are not in line with what yours is. We've told you on how each country should have a right to stand up for what they believe in, regardless of what other nations are believing in. So we don't think it's fair for you to put political pressure towards these particular countries for their different ideals. With that, we believe that the government side has not proven to us their burden, and the opposition has. Thank you.
Thank the opposition reply, and now invite the government.
To quote the leader of opposition, being gay is not a universal right. That is horribly wrong. Every single individual in this room has the right to be gay. That is why that right is people within Uganda. We from side government, we from side government want to give that change to the people within Uganda. We help you. That's a universal right that's not given to them. We will give it to you. The underlying principle of side opposition is this. Two things. Number one, why not attack Russia or any other gay country? But number two, it won't work, and that's feasibility, right? How did we tackle with these two main issues before we got on to the actual case, right? Number one, firstly, we're not proving, like Siddhartha said, it's not our burden to take everyone, the best people in the world. At least we're solving a significant amount of problems that exist within Uganda as whole. If another debate we have the capacity to kill Russian gay oppressors, we will do that, sure, why not, right? But the second thing is this, about feasibility. Two questions. If it works, then are you okay with us? Because that's principally consistent with our case anyway. But secondly, it will work. 92% of the economy depends on other nations. If you cut it off, the president must be reject the situation, because people will die, people will suffer, and they will kick him out of parliament. That is a check and balance that exists. We don't think he will reject it anyway. What are the arguments that came from side opposition, and how do we respond to them? Number one, exploitation is not justified. First response, this is conditional aid, not humanitarian aid. So there is no humanitarian benefit because we want to change the situation that exists within society. Number two, this is not exploitation, because we're standing up for the people who deserve to be given the right, just like in any other nation where you have the ability to do so. Number three, even if it is a condition that you have to have some value behind it, and you have to be it cannot come at the expense of harming more gay people within your country, because that is just simply and blatantly unjustified. But the fourth issue, and this nitpicking issue that they have, right, this quality, that taxpayers will not be pleased with the situation that is. Hello, you voted Obama into your place, that's why you trust him with your tax money. If you use your tax money to benefit the nation of USA as a whole, then and therefore it is justified. Secondly, they talk about the nature of society and how the policy will never change, because you can change the government, but you cannot change the society. Firstly, we think it's important to understand that if you change the government's policies have an impact on the society. If I say put sin taxes on the cigarette boxes, that means the government doesn't really want you to smoke, right? That's impact on society. That's important to understand with the situations like this. The third thing that they brought up is that this law is for the protection of gays to begin with. So you're telling me that you're putting them in jails, oppressing them, and ignoring them within status quo because you want to protect them in situations like this. I don't think so. Because if the government is so gay friendly, they wouldn't have passed the bill saying you can kill all gays, right, in the year 2014. We think that's understandable. But then this is what I told you, right? It won't happen because people still rape, people still murder because I do it. Because I have emotions and so on and so forth. At least you significantly reduce the number of people who rape, murder within status quo. You now significantly reduce the number of people who discriminate people within status quo. That's important to understand, right? We won't make perfection. But then they talk about how you criminalize them because they're holding hands in society. And it's their fault and they're showing a public display of affection. So it's okay for two straight couples to hold public hands and show a public display of affection. I don't think that's fair. Because in situations like this, you have to be equal. But the last thing they talked about was AIDS, right? On how you need to prevent AIDS and so on and so forth. Here's a suggestion. If you don't criminalize AIDS, don't criminalize homosexuality, if people actually come out, you can identify who has AIDS and then help them, right? But second response that we provided to you in status quo is that even if it's so problematic, is it really proportional? Because the number of individuals that are dying as a result of your discriminatory policy is far too much compared to the number of individuals who are dying as a result of AIDS. What are the arguments they brought to this debate? Number one, that conditional aid must necessarily exist. Because the problem has been going on for far too long, discrimination has been existing for far too long, and people are dying because they choose a simple lifestyle. Number two, we talked about how these policies must benefit a lot of people. When you remove the idea that they are criminals in status quo, they will be able to reap the benefits that any average tax-paying contributing citizens necessarily does. But the third thing we talked about that was not responded to by side of opposition is the future of Uganda. To a certain extent, you can never depend on the United States or any other country for the rest of your life. To the point in time where they can stand on their own 2 feet, they don't need you anymore. They will just oppress the gays because they can. We want to control that, and we control it now before they get too powerful and they can keep very proud to propose.
I thank both teams, guys. They cross the floor, shake hands, everyone.